they had prepared. They found they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly two men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb, stopping and looking in. He saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened. The word of God for the people of God. Please be seated. Well, happy Easter. Hallelujah. Christ has risen.
Christ has risen indeed. Hallelujah.
I was reading this week about a pastor named Wayne Major. When Major was in high school, he and a friend pulled a great prank. One of them owned a car in which you could pull the back upper part of the back seat down and slide from out the trunk into the back seat. That gave them an idea for a prank. One of them would hide in the trunk while the other would drive the car and pick up one of their friends. Now the two guys in the front seat would get involved in a deep conversation. Meanwhile, the one hiding in the trunk would remove the upper part of the back seat and sneak out and take place in the back seat as if he had been there the whole time. Then he would suddenly join into the conversation. Surprise! Surprises can be fun. If I had to choose one word to characterize the reaction of Jesus' followers that first Easter Sunday, it would be surprise. But maybe we shouldn't be surprised at that. After all, it is the most astounding event in human history. A Baptist church in Bangladesh was showing a film about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus to an audience filled with people who had never heard the gospel before. Little children sat in front and in the aisles. The adults stood in the back. As the story of Jesus' crucifixion unfolded and Jesus' broken body was laid in the tomb, there were tears and audible gasps. As the affected audience watched, one young boy suddenly spoke up. "Don't be afraid," the little boy said. "He gets up again. I saw it before." Can you imagine being exposed to the gospel for the first time and watching the crucifixion scene being reenacted, and then through the power of the motion picture to witness his resurrection? Surprise! He who was dead has now risen and is alive. Try to see this morning's Bible passage through the eyes of the women who first visited the tomb. Imagine their surprise when they discover that Jesus is not there. Why were the women coming to Jesus' tomb so early that Sunday morning? They had unfinished business. It took a long time to anoint a body for burial, and they couldn't complete the process before the sun went down on Friday evening after he was crucified. The Sabbath begins, as we know, sundown on Friday. And then it concludes at sundown on Saturday. They were devout Jewish women. They were careful not to do any work on the Sabbath, even to prepare their friend's body for burial. So the women had to come back to the tomb on Sunday morning to complete the burial ritual. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the woman took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of Jesus, their Lord. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee. The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day he would rise again." Then they remembered his words. When they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. Somebody saw a cartoon of the women after they had visited the tomb on Easter morning. One woman is kneeling and weeping in joy, and the other one is looking at her basket and commenting with a scowl on her face. Well, I certainly hope you kept the receipt for all those burial spices. Now, I doubt any of the women worried about the cost of those spices that morning. I doubt they were worrying about anything. They had just witnessed the most important moment in history. He was alive. He has risen. And they were experiencing the good news. So let us consider for a few moments the surprising elements of Easter. First of all, the resurrection marks the moment when life overcame death. I mean, that's the primary reason most of us are here today. Death has been overcome. Professional golfer Paul Azinger was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 33. He wrote about that experience. "A genuine feeling of fear came over me that I could die from cancer. But then another reality hit me even harder. I'm going to die eventually anyway, whether from cancer or something else. I'm definitely going to die. It's just a question of when." Suddenly, everything I had accomplished in golf became meaningless to me. All I wanted to do was live. And that's when he remembered something that his friend, Larry Moody, told him. "Zinger," he said, "we are not in the land of the living going to the land of the dying. We are in the land of the dying going to the land of the living." I want you to hear that again. We are not in the land of the living going to the land of the dying. We are in the land of the dying going to the land of the living. That's what Easter is all about. Listen again to the words from the angel. "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen." We are not in the land of the living going to the land of the dying. And Easter reminds us that we are in the land of the dying and we are on our way to the land of the living. Paul Azinger wrote about how his perspective on life changed as he underwent his cancer treatments and returned to the PGA Tour. He wrote, "The only way you will ever have true contentment is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ." Now, I realize I'm preaching to the choir, but there probably is no truer statement on earth. The only way to achieve true contentment in your life is to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm not saying that nothing ever bothers me and that I don't have problems, but I feel like I've found the answer to the 6-foot hole. I know I'll spend eternity with God. And I have a promise that as a child of God, He will help me deal with anything. He promises to offer me contentment, regardless of what life brings, even cancer. As frightening as that word is. The resurrection marks the moment when life overcame death. The resurrection also marks the moment when hope overcame grief. The power of death and loss and grief can destroy a person. It can also cause us to lose all hope. Pastor Stephen Brown said he was devastated after his younger brother Ron died suddenly of a heart attack. Ron was only in his 40s, a popular district attorney, a terrific father. Stephen never even got the chance to say goodbye. Several weeks after Ron's death, Stephen decided to visit his brother's grave. It was a cold, rainy afternoon in late winter. Now, Ron's grave was not yet marked, and Stephen couldn't find it. As he trekked through the mud, his grief overwhelmed him. Standing in the rain, Stephen began sobbing. God, this has been the worst month of my life, and now I can't even find my brother's grave. Suddenly, Stephen sensed a presence near him, as though Christ had drawn alongside of him. These same words that the angel spoke came to the mind like a burst of light. Why do you look for the living among the dead? Those words comforted me, Stephen later wrote. And I have a whole new outlook when I visit my brother's grave now. Even death cannot destroy the hope of those who believe in Jesus Christ. The resurrection marks the moment when hope overcame grief. Finally, the resurrection marks the moment when we have to make a decision. Will we leave here like the women, bursting with joy and telling everyone we know about the eternal life offered through knowing Jesus? Or will we leave here like Peter, who saw the empty tomb and grave clothes and just walked away, unconvinced? One of the most surprising elements in the story of the first Easter is the initial reaction of the disciples to the women's testimony about finding the tomb empty. Luke tells us they did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. There was one exception. Peter, says Luke, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves. And then he went away, wondering to himself what had happened. What a tepid response to such a dramatic event. The resurrection demands a greater response than that. I mean, this is a decisive moment in human history. Jesus, who claimed to be the living embodiment of the one true God, died. After 3 days, he came back to life. There is no other belief system on earth that teaches this about their founder, or their prophet, or their God with a little g. The resurrection serves as the foundation of Christian faith, and it serves as our foundation of the Christian church. Without the resurrection, all we have is a great philosophy for living. If the resurrection is alive, then death is the end of the story for you and for me. But it isn't a lie. It's true. It's real. And it is the most important truth known to humanity. In his classic novel, The Road, a powerful movie if you've never seen it, Lloyd C. Douglas has a character called Marcellus, who had become fascinated with Jesus. He wrote letters to his fiancée, Diana, in Rome. He told her about Jesus' teachings, about his miracles, then about his crucifixion and his resurrection. Finally, he informed her that he was going to become one of Jesus' disciples. Excuse me. In her letter of response, Diana said, "What I feared was that it might affect you. It is a beautiful story. Let it remain so. We don't have to do anything about it, do we?" And the answer to her question is, yes, we do. We have to do something about it. We have to decide, is the resurrection the truth or a lie? If it's the truth, It marks the most important moment in human history. And it calls us to a very special kind of life here and now, a life following Jesus. When Jesus was born, a host of angels announced it and sang his praises. But the only ones who heard it were a few poor shepherds on the night shift. When Jesus rose from the dead, only 2 angels showed up to announce it, and they told it to a few handful of grieving women. Only a few that day heard the message of Jesus. We must change that. We want to leave here and go tell the world and everyone we know, Jesus is alive. The question is,